Good evening. It's 8 o'clock. The top headline tonight. The Prime Minister is at a global climate summit with world leaders. Hugs and handshakes as he meets world leaders, including the US President, the British Prime Minister and many others. Representatives of 200 countries currently at Glasgow, Scotland. COP26 will focus on how the world and countries will address the challenge of global warming. Second highest GST collections this October. GST revenue collection over 1,30,000 crores. And commercial LPG also up by over 200 rupees per cylinder. The latest hike, commercial LPG now crosses 2,000 rupees per cylinder. Well, an important day across India as schools reopen in Tamil Nadu, Kerala and Delhi. Primary school children are also back at school. Teachers welcome children with roses, songs and movies. Akhilesh versus Yogi in the UP campaign. Akhilesh's Jinnah remark leads to a Talibani retort. Akhilesh Yadav mentions Gandhi, Nehru, Patel and Jinnah as those who fought for India's freedom. The BJP now calls him Akhilesh Ali Jinnah and Namazwadi instead of Samajwadi. After 4 months, ex-Maharashtra Home Minister appears before the Enforcement Directorate. His questioning is still on. He could even be arrested, reports say. Meanwhile, it's drugs versus underworld links is the fight between Maharashtra Minister Nawab Malik and ex-Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis. An ex-SBI chairman, Pradeep Chaudhary, is arrested in an alleged loan fraud, but the state bank and ex-bankers say all processes were followed. How can individual bankers be targeted? Our lead story tonight, well, one of the world's most important conferences to face the global warming challenge, COP26, or the Conference of Parties or Countries meeting for the 26th time in Glasgow, Scotland. Prime Minister Modi is there. He's currently having a bilateral with the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He's one of the many world leaders, including the US President Joe Biden, who's at this global summit in Glasgow, Scotland. The Russian President Vladimir Putin is not attending. The G20 has already committed to staying at a 1.5 degrees Celsius target for cutting emissions. So they haven't raised that. And of course, the big question is whether they'll even meet that. But as of now, each country will present its vision on how they will commit to cutting global warming. And the Prime Minister will be speaking at Glasgow at 8:30 in just a short time from now. We'll be live on that. But let's go across now first live to Glasgow, where Radhika is covering the conference. And Radhika, what's the latest? What are the details here we have? What's the expectations of the Indian Prime Minister's speech?
We just been told that the Prime Minister concluded a by-invite meeting on climate action and activities where he spoke about adaptation. Of course, that was a closed group meeting with some leaders by invite, including the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Mr. Boris Johnson. In about an hour from now, local time, Sonia, we will hear the Prime Minister make his national statement at the COP26, and this will be the official stand that India will be taking on this aspect of climate change. It's the first time that India will officially be sharing a statement post 2015's Paris Agreement, where it pledged to bring down carbon emission by about 35%, which it says is on track to achieve that very target. Here in Glasgow, in Scotland, there are protesters from various parts of the country protesting against climate change, also seeking climate justice, also in a sense disrupting some activities because they seem to believe that there is a lot of emission even while having events such as this one. But there are some others who are just here to share ideas, thoughts and share their expectations. For instance, I have with me a young man, a youth activist by name Janmejay Singh, who's come here all the way from where? Bhopal, you said?
I've come from Bhopal.
What brings you here?
So I joined some activists on a walk from London to Glasgow. This is my second walk and we are walking for climate justice. We are a network of youth around the world who have come together because we are really worried about our planet. And we want to make sure that the youth and the poor of our country especially are represented, because if you have solar energy powering only the big cities, it's not going to be enough. We need solar power in the villages. We need villages to kind of come up, and India is 60% young people.
Yeah.
So young people really need representation because we are the ones who have already inherited this planet, in a sense, and the ones who are going to inherit it should not inherit only the floods and the landslides and the climate disasters, but we need to inherit a green and happy planet in which we can breathe happily.
Sure. Thank you very much for joining us, Janmijay. I really hope that for all of us, that there are some really concrete plans and targets that are being shared, which hopefully will be achieved because there is a tracking system and conference of parties will be tracked for the kind of pledges they make here, Sonia. Of course, there are 12 days for negotiations to happen, and arriving at a consensus is not so simple because this is not just climate change. These are politicians who are coming together. So there is a lot of politics, the kind of bilateral relations that nations share with each other, which will play a role. But it is very evident from sources that Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be speaking for about 5 minutes or so, I'm told, in Hindi. There will be live translation. And his speech, we are told, it will largely focus on the progress that India has made. And like the young man said, speak a lot about renewable energy, which is India's strength. Also, perhaps speak a little bit about fossil fuels. At least that's the hope, because research scholars are saying that if India wants to get that kind of financial help it needs to reach its target by 2030 from developed nations, then it would have to put on the table some tangible targeted measures on how really it is going to walk away gradually, if not sooner, from fossil fuels such as coal, which India is highly dependent on.
Minister Piyush Goyal also there at the G20 making the point that India needs to get sanctions and be part of lifted and be part of the NSG group, get membership if you want India to shift from coal to nuclear power and meet our needs. Thanks very much, Radhika, for joining me. Well, some good news on the economic front. The GST revenue collections the month of October has been our second highest ever at 1,30,127 crores. You can see that after some months of it being down, our highest was in April this year, which was just after that in the middle actually of that deadly second wave, and we had 1.4 crores, and then now in October, after dipping in the months in between, we had over 1,30,000 crores. And the Sensex Nifty also snapping a 3-day losing streak on Monday after a broad-based buying interest as investor sentiment got a boost from robust macroeconomic data pointers, the strong GST numbers and factory activity expanding at its quickest pace in 8 months in October. So the Sensex up by over 831 points. The Nifty also up by 258 points there. Also a good response to the Nykaa IPO as well today, which was oversubscribed. But something which is hitting the average person hard is the price of LPG. And after cooking gas cylinders went up today, the price of commercial LPG cylinders was also raised by 266 rupees. That's the biggest hike in at least the last 2 years. It's bad news for small businesses also looking at, well, good Diwali earnings. So a commercial gas cylinder now costs over 2,000 rupees.
सर रिफाइंड आज आपने सुना सिलेंडर बढ़ गया है, आज आपने सुना सिलेंडर का रेट बढ़ गया। बताइए कहाँ से बनाए, कैसे सस्ता करें, बताइए, मजबूरी है।
A massive 266 rupee or 12% hike in the price of the commercial LPG cylinder means it will not be a very happy Diwali for Shalini Agnihotri. She has a small business making and selling snacks in Lucknow. A single commercial cylinder will now cost 2,093 rupees in Uttar Pradesh's capital. This is the 8th hike in the price of commercial LPG cylinders just this year, up 65%.
हम लोग तो बीजेपी के कट्टर सपोर्टर हैं। कोई कुछ बोल देता था तो बहुत ज़्यादा लगता था। खासकर माननीय मोदी जी से मेरा ये कहना है कि मतलब हम लोगों के मन को चेंज होने से प्लीज़ रिक्वेस्ट है हाथ जोड़ के कि हमारे मन चेंज हो, हमारे पूरे परिवार को इस समय इतनी ठीक है, कोरोना में आपने बहुत कुछ किया, लेकिन हम लोग जिंदा रहें उसके लिए कमाना जरूरी है.
Another segment that is going to be affected big time with the rise in prices of the commercial LPG cylinder are these smaller sweet shops that cannot really afford to absorb this price rise and were hoping for some profit margins during Diwali. But with just 3 days to go for Diwali, this price rise is likely to hit them hard. आपके बिजनेस पे सर दिवाली के टाइम पे क्या फर्क पड़ेगा?
यार इतने टाइम की महंगाई की वजह से हम लोग कुछ नहीं कर पा रहे हैं. समझ में नहीं आ रहा करे तो करे क्या, कस्टमर को कैसे दें, कैसे क्या करें. कस्टमर कहता है हमको सस्ता चाहिए, हमको महंगा मिलता है हर एक चीज़, तो हम करें क्या इसके लिए बताइए.
With state elections in UP in less than 6 months, the opposition is trying to turn price rise into a big election issue. Samajwadi Party chief Akhilesh Yadav tweeted, calling the commercial cylinder price hike the BJP's fatal gift to an already under pressure business community.
सर आज जो है एलपीजी सिलेंडर के दाम बढ़े हैं सर आज फिर एलपीजी सिलेंडर
When asked today on the LPG price rise, this is how UP Deputy Chief Minister Keshav Maurya reacted. A sign, the opposition claims, that the BJP is feeling the heat over spiraling prices. With Mohammad Adnan in Hapur and camera person Vineet Verma, this is Alok Pandey, NDTV.
So as Alok said, the Deputy Chief Minister refusing to answer on the hike in commercial LPG, but attacking Akhilesh Yadav on what he said yesterday on Sardar Patel's anniversary, where he talked about freedom icons for India like Mahatma Gandhi, Sardar Patel, Pandit Nehru and Jinnah. So that remark by Akhilesh Yadav has led to strong comments, with the Chief Minister saying that this shows a Talibani mindset and the Deputy Chief Minister saying that he should be called Akhilesh Ali Jinnah.
सरदार पटेल जी, राष्ट्रपिता महात्मा गांधी, जवाहरलाल नेहरू, जिन्ना एक ही संस्था में पढ़ करके बैरिस्टर बन करके आए थे। एक ही जगह पर पढ़ाई लिखाई की उन्होंने, वो बैरिस्टर बने, उन्होंने आजादी दिलाई। उन्हें किसी भी तरीके से अगर किसी का भी संघर्ष करना पड़ा होगा तो वो पीछे नहीं हटे। एक विचारधारा जिस पे पाबंदी लगाई, अगर किसी ने पाबंदी लगाई थी तो लोह सरदार पटेल जी ने उस विचारधारा पे पाबंदी लगाने का काम किया था।
वह देश तोड़क जिन्ना की जिन्ना से इस राष्ट्र को जोड़ने वाले सरदार वल्लभ भाई पटेल की तुलना कर रहे थे। जब उन्होंने सरदार पटेल को जिन्ना के समकक्ष रख करके देश तोड़क जिन्ना को महिमामंडित करने का प्रयास किया है और महापुरुषों पर लांछन लगा करके पूरे के पूरे समाज को अपमानित करने का प्रयास हो रहा है।
Meanwhile, let's move from news from Maharashtra, where the ex-Home Minister of the state, Mr. Deshmukh, finally showed up in front of the Enforcement Directorate after 4 months of being absconding. However, Mr. Deshmukh said he was not absconding, that he was appealing in various courts, and he asked where the man who accused him, the ex-Police Commissioner Parambir Singh, had disappeared amid reports of him having left the country. The ED is still questioning Mr. Deshmukh amid reports that he could be arrested. Meanwhile, the political fight continued today between Nawab Malik, Minister in the Cabinet of Maharashtra, and ex-Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis over drugs and the underworld.
The former Maharashtra Home Minister missing for 4 months, turning up at the Enforcement Directorate office this morning after missing repeated summons. Anil Deshmukh is being investigated in a case that started from a letter by the former police commissioner accusing him of corruption. Ironically, the former police commissioner himself has been missing and is suspected to have fled the country. As the BJP used Deshmukh to target the government, a defiant Deshmukh hit back, saying those supporting Parambir Singh must explain where he is.
अजूनही माझी केस सुप्रीम कोर्टामध्ये पेंडिंग आहे, पण आज मी स्वतः ईडी के ऑफिसमध्ये स्वतः इथे हजर झालेलो आहे. आपल्याला माहित आहे की मुंबईचे माजी पोलीस आयुक्त परमवीर सिंग यांनी माझ्यावर खोटे आरोप केले. ज्या परमवीर सिंगांनी माझ्यावर आरोप केलेत ते परमवीर सिंग आज कुठे आहेत?
While Deshmukh's case was in fallout of the high-profile Ambani residence explosives case, another high-profile political battle over Bollywood superstar Shah Rukh Khan's son's case. Maharashtra Minister Nawab Malik, who has been targeting the zonal director of the Anti-Drugs Bureau, demanding accountability, turned on former Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis. Malik shared photographs of a man named Jaideep Rana in jail in connection with a drug trafficking case with Maharashtra's leader of opposition, Devendra Fadnavis's wife, Amruta Fadnavis. Malik alleges Rana was involved in financing a song featuring Amruta Fadnavis. Fadnavis countered, alleging links between Nawab Malik and the underworld. Interestingly, without a word about informing the police, Fadnavis said he would share it with NCP Supremo, Sharad Pawar.
एक फुलझड़ी जलाई है तो बम तो फूटेगा और दिवाली के बाद फूटेगा।
जिस तरह से जयदीप राणा की तस्वीरें आई, ये योगा योग नहीं कि वो उनके गाने का फाइनेंशियल हेड है, उसके बाद भी उनकी घनिष्ठता एक उनके घर की तस्वीर से दिखती है। जो देवेंद्र जी का वजह है, वो लगातार एनसीबी ऑफिस में बैठता है। पूरा ड्रग का खेल कहीं ना कहीं देवेंद्र जी के आशीर्वाद से महाराष्ट्र में चल रहा है, चल रहा था, ये स्पष्ट है।
While Anil Deshmukh has reappeared, Parambir Singh is still nowhere to be found. And as the anti-drugs agency, the NCB's zonal director faces allegations of false cases and fraud, with Nawab Malik's fresh set of allegations and Devendra Fadnavis entering the picture, it's become a full-blown NCP versus BJP war. In Mumbai with camera person Rajendra Dayalkar, Saurabh Gupta, NDTV.
Well, let's look at the COVID numbers. The good news is that despite huge crowds this festive season, our cases are still low at just over 12,514. That's down since yesterday. Also, the other numbers, the deaths in the last 24 hours are 251. Again, that's down. The vaccinations today are up at over 49 lakhs. The tests are down in the last 24 hours as well. It's 8,81,000. The daily positivity rate is 1.42%, up slightly, but not a reason for worry. Across the world, there are still surges being reported once again, and this is even in countries which are highly vaccinated. In Russia, however, where vaccinations are low, that's about 30%. I think the cases are up, the highest in the world currently at 39,931. In the United Kingdom also, cases are at 37,732. This is despite high vaccinations. So there aren't high hospitalization. The deaths, as we can see, are remaining steady. They're followed by Turkey, where cases are 23,948 in the last 24 hours. Then the United States, where cases are down at just above 20,000, and followed by Brazil. All of these countries with populations much, much lower than India, but we are seeing fresh surges reported, especially in Europe.